All right, so let's get into the next branch, which is showing. I mean, asynchronous activity in mobile is not super valuable. A lot of times, what we need to do is async. So I wanted to show an asynchronous version of this, and yeah, I'll do that now. So if we check out the third branch, so the nice thing is you'll just be able to check out for dash whatever, and you can auto-complete it. So if we check out the third branch, we can go in here, it'll update. And so if you look over here at the file structure, you'll see that I now have a login. I have this inside of a login package, and I have asynchronous and synchronous login interactors. And so all I needed to do is in my presenter, all right, well, let's go look at the login activity. It looks exactly the same. Nothing's really changed. The only thing you might see is right here. I added a dialog, and I just show authenticating, and that's it. So I changed one. Well, I had to dismiss it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 lines of code. And that's more just really to make it better for the user. So I wouldn't really consider those, major changes to my view. So let's watch what we do now. We still pass it. We still pass our presenter the iLogin view. So anything that implements the iLogin view can go through this. And instead of synchronous interactor, like you can see I have over here, let's see, synchronous login interactor. I changed this for an asynchronous login interactor. And then the rest of the code basically stays exactly, oh no, so what changed is instead of having this thing return a Boolean, now I pass in a reference to this, which this is saying anything that implements an onLogin listener. So you'll see I called out a credentials, it runs in here, and then for this method, you have to pass in a login listener, a string, and a username. Then I run an asynchronous, basically a mock asynchronous kind of request that will then call back on my onSuccess methods or my onError, and it waits 2 seconds. But so this is calling now, it's calling back on my presenter, it's not calling back on my activity. And so my presenter gets this view, and it either calls view failed or view navigate to list activity. And so I'll go ahead and just run the simulator really quick to show you kind of what's going on, to prove the magic in a way. And it should be coming up soon. What I like about this is like my interactor is all that changed, and now it's asynchronous. And so that makes it a lot easier to test. And let's see if it's up. Okay, cool. So once again, the email right when the event comes, it's going to pass it to the presenter. The presenter is then going to go do an asynchronous task, and then the view is just going to wait, and then it'll eventually call back. So here we go. Submit it. Authenticating goes back, waiting 2 seconds, and then it comes and shows a toast. So it's not super impressive, but it at least kind of shows you the idea of what I'm trying to do. So here would be a failure, and you'll see it does a toast there as well. And then we can pass it again. All right, awesome. So that's a simple example of changing the back end out and not affecting the view, which is a huge benefit that we've been able to realize by using this pattern. So let's go ahead and do the next one now. So I'm going to say get checkout, and I'll just do 4, and it should check it out. All right, and so in this one, what I'm trying to do is I'm going to show you guys how to do a list now, because a login is cool, but it's important to also be able to see how to use more like realistic and more common user interface things, user interface components. So in my UI now, I have a repo list activity, So this is a new view, right? And it implements the iRepo list view. And it has just a list view and a presenter. And when the list view, and this is where I'm passing in the view, the repo list presenter will then go and it gets access. So we're in the presenter, we have access to the view and access to the interactor. And in the interactor, we pass in a listener. So that's what comes back right here. This repo interactor finished listener. You'll see this is using retrofit, and I would normally pull this into another class or inject it using Dagger or something, but this is faster for demonstration purposes. And what I want it to do in this situation is the interactor gets a reference to a listener, and when he gets caught, so this is a GitHub kind of just hitting GitHub's API and pulling in repos. And what it does is it fetches a list of repositories and it passes in the username, so a GitHub username, and then it passes in this interactor because it implements this callback. And so the callback will either come back with a success or a failure, and then we will call back on the listener, which will then call back on our presenter, either network success or network failure, which will then call back on our view, and we'll either get an on repos loaded success where we set an adapter, or we get a failure where we show an edit text. And then I think this is an important thing to show. So this list view is one of our views. It's a widget or whatever. It's a smaller, it's not like view as I'm talking about in like this higher level pattern where an activity is a view. This is like an Android view. And what we do is instead of doing like a really annoying list view dot set on click listener new on click, and then having something really nasty like this clutter up our code, what we're doing is we're saying, since this whole object implements view manipulation, then why don't we just say this, and then we'll have to go and we'll have to implement that method somewhere on this view, this activity. And so that's what I'm doing there. So I'm saying, hey, you implement that, and then basically it comes through right here. And so whenever an adapter view, or whenever it's clicked, it's going to call this method, and I'm just going to say whether or not this repository is forked or whether it's an original work from the user. So let's show the kind of the whole thing. It'll make a little bit more sense. So I'm going to be getting a list of repositories and that they're from a specific GitHub username over a network, serialize it using retrofit, sort it in my interactor from right here. Once I get this on success, I'm going to sort it, and then I'm going to go and return it to my listener in my presenter, which will return it to my view. And so it should be ready by now. So I'm going to log in with Jake Warden, and the reason is because his repositories are pretty impressive on GitHub. Way more impressive than mine. So anyways, I log in, click submit, it authenticates, it goes in, and then it's going to go and run all of that, all that logic to create a list. And so what we proved in the other one by doing a synchronous front end or a synchronous login, and then we switched to an async, and we didn't have to change anything on the front end really. We just added a progress dialog, but that's more just because we care about the user than that we really needed to do it. or as far as like architecturally. So what we want to do next is to be able to substitute this whole screen, this activity, this view. We're going to now go and substitute it for a fragment and see how much changes on our backend.